Hi friends, happy World Card Making Day. So in today's video, we are going to be making these beautiful vintage inspired Halloween cards using napkins and plastic wrap. So if you're interested to see how this is done, then stay tuned. There are a lot of beautiful Halloween napkins on the market, but I found these gorgeous Joanna Parker ones at Marshall's for $2.99 a pack. So you're going to take your napkin and open it up. And I like to start this project by just ironing the back side of it just to get any initial wrinkles out of the napkin before we start. And with each napkin, it kind of depends on the ply that you have. So if it's 2-ply, 3-ply, we only want to use the first layer. So you want to remove all layers of ply. And I found that when I ironed it, the top layer removed really easily. And I knew that this was 3-ply because you can tell that the bottom layer is not very transparent. So I'm using some double-sided tape to kind of help the process of separating those two layers. So I just kind of place the tape down and then gently tug to create that rip through that second layer. And then from there, I just carefully remove that top layer off the base layer. And once you get it going, it's really easy to separate. And I found it to be very therapeutic as well, removing that second layer. So to start, I'm going to be using 2 sheets of this pre-cut parchment paper, and this I just found at Dollar Tree. It makes it really easy since it's already pre-cut. So we're going to need 1 layer for your surface and then 1 to cover the top of the napkin. So we're basically going to make a sandwich. But before we do that, I am going to cut a panel off of a part of my napkin. Now, if you're using an all over pattern, you don't really have to do this. It just kind of depends on what kind of card you want to make. But for me, since this is a directional napkin, then I just want to go ahead and use the 1 panel here. Now I've already pre-cut my cardstock and I'm using this really nice ivory color to make the napkin colors pop. And basically you're going to take some plastic wrap. Now I'm using this plastic wrap from Walmart. I initially was using the Kirkland plastic wrap and it was not giving me any success. So I went ahead and tried a different brand. So you might have to do some trial and error using different plastic wraps to see which one will work best for you in this project. So you just want to cut a piece of plastic wrap that is a little bit larger than your cardstock and your napkin size. And once you do that, you're going to place your napkin layer right on top. And then you're going to place your parchment piece right on top of that. And you want to make sure that your iron, isn't touching the plastic wrap because, of course, if the plastic melts on your iron, that is not a good thing. So we just want to make sure that as we're melting the plastic, it is contained within the parchment. So I am just going to go ahead and heat this on the highest setting to melt that plastic. And I pass it over a few times and continue to pass it over, making sure that I'm getting all the corners and any bubbles out of the napkin. Now, once that's done, you're going to remove it from the parchment and then set that aside to basically cool down before we start trimming all of those rough edges. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same steps for the next 2 pieces of napkin. And again, you're just remembering to create the sandwich. So we have our parchment, we have our cardstock, then we have the plastic wrap, just enough to cover the surface of your cardstock, and lay your napkin right on top. And then top that off with the parchment. And then make sure that you're heating the napkin completely and making sure that you take your time, go slowly, make sure that you get every inch, every corner of the napkin. And just remember that if you do miss a spot, you can go right back in and make sure that you heat that spot and basically melt all that plastic wrap. And then just like we did previously, you're going to remove the napkin from the parchment and then place that aside to cool down. And you want to make sure that you're not fudging with it. You just kind of let it set and rest. Otherwise, it will remove itself from the cardstock, and you want to make sure that it cures before you start trimming any edges and so on. And once again, repeat the same process for the third napkin. Once all 3 napkins have cured, you're going to go ahead and just trim around the edges just to give it a nice clean edge and remove all of that extra plastic wrap that's hanging off. Now, after you've trimmed all 3 of them, this is just personal preference, but I like to just make sure that everything is adhered properly. So I just give it one more go. So I place it right back on the parchment. I put the other piece of parchment right on top, and then I just make sure that I heat set everything once again, just in case any edges came loose when I was trimming. So you don't have to do this step, but if you want to just give it one more go, you can do that here. And then once you're done here, you're going to let that sit for one more time. And basically you're going to start preparing your cardstock that you're going to place these on. So these are the 3 pattern pieces of paper that I'm going to use for each individual napkin. And for the base, I decided to go with the craft cardstock. And I just think craft cardstock adds to kind of that vintage look. So I'm going to take this 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and fold each one right down the middle. And I use a bone folder just to make sure I get a nice crisp edge on the front and the back. And you're going to repeat that process for all 3 pieces of cardstock. Now, there's no exact science to my measuring. I just eyeball it. So I place the pattern sheet that I want to use, and I just kind of eyeball the sides and the bottom to see how much space I want between each piece. So that's what I'm doing here, and then I will cut everything down to size. So I will cut the cardstock down to size, the craft cardstock down to size, and the pattern piece of paper down to size as well. And just to make sure everything is consistent for the other 2 pieces of napkin, I am basically using the cardstock that we just trimmed and the pattern piece of paper that we just trimmed, and using that as a template for the next set of craft cardstock and pattern paper. So it just makes it a lot easier than having to eyeball it again. So you just kind of place it right on top, mark it, cut it, and then repeat the process for the pattern piece of paper. Now, this is, of course, the method that I feel very comfortable with and works really well for me. So if there is a better method that you prefer, then by all means do the method that you feel most comfortable with. But this is just how I craft, and I never measure. I just kind of eyeball it. It just makes things a lot easier, and it makes it go a lot faster too. Now we're going to start assembling our card together. So starting with the first one, I am just going to go ahead and take the craft cardstock, place the pattern piece right on top, and then the other piece will go right on top of that. So before we do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and adhere the pattern piece of paper down. And after I placed the tape down, I did realize that I wanted to actually distress the edges of each piece of paper. So right after I removed the layer of the protective layer of the tape, I set that aside before I adhere it down, just so I can go ahead and distress the edges of the cardstock. And for that, I am going with a combo of Vintage Photo and Black Soot from the Tim Holtz Ranger Distress line. Love the Distress inks. I use them quite a bit, and I use them also in the Michael's DIY craft that I did last year, the Cabinet of Curiosities. So I'll link that in the description down below. I loved how that one turned out. But for every piece, I am just going to go ahead and use that combo around the cardstock, around the napkin piece, and you'll see I'm using some ephemera as well, so I will distress that. So now we're going to take that pattern piece of paper and adhere that down. And I am just going to do that very carefully. I try to be right in the center to make sure that I have enough or equal spacing on the sides, top and bottom. I'm not always on target, but I do my very best. So after you do that, I'm then going to go ahead and take the napkin piece and go ahead and distress that with the black soot. And I decided to just use the black soot around the orange just because I felt like the black really made the orange pop a little bit more. So I'm just taking that right along all four sides. And then I will also add the black soot distress ink along the ticket stub, which I am using a vintage ticket stub as a piece of ephemera that you'll see me adhere on the corner of the card. So to add some textural elements to the card, I am just going to go ahead and take these scrap pieces of pattern paper that we just cut off, and I basically just cut some pieces into sections and using some ribbon remnants that kind of go along with the pattern and scheme of the card. So here I am distressing the vintage ticket stub, and I had this in my stash from a seller that I had purchased this from a while ago, and now it's the perfect time to use it. So that's why diving into your stash is so important. So here I am going to go ahead and use some rub-on transfers, and I wanted to just kind of give the ticket stub a little bit of something on top. So I'm using the rub-on transfers from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and take this boo and apply it right on top of that stub. And I think it's perfect because this is a ghost card, so boo is very appropriate. So I'm just cutting that out, and then with a popsicle stick, I'm going to go ahead and just transfer that right on top of the ticket. So now I'm just going to take the stub and the remnant pattern paper and the remnant ribbon, and I'm just going to arrange it together in a cluster and basically just going to layer it like that. And once I have it in the configuration that I really like, then I'm going to take my Tim Holtz mini attacher. I love this tool. It is so useful when you don't want to glue anything down, but you want to just add that kind of rugged look. So using the tiny attacher to staple that into place, I absolutely love it. So I go ahead and just crisscross the staples there. And then on the top left corner of the card, I use two other remnant ribbons, and I basically just staple them again into that top left corner just to add a little bit of interest to both corners there. And then using some foam squares on the back just to add some dimensionality, I am going to go ahead and just adhere that right onto the card front. And there you go, the very first card complete. And I think it's beautiful. So now we're going to go ahead and work on the last two. So this is how these beautiful cards were made, and I love how each and every one turned out. It's really nice if you make a bunch of these, gift them to someone, put them in a cellophane envelope, make it into a Halloween birthday card. You can make it into a baby shower card, invitations to a Halloween party. The options are endless. And it's just really cool because you can make a whole assembly line of these cards. As you can see, each one is different, but they have the same elements to them. So it just makes it really easy for you to just kind of make it and then assemble it pretty quickly. So if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell for notifications for more content to come. And I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye.